Welcome to the Overwatch Origins panel.
What up, BlizzCon?
What's up, everyone? So we're pretty excited to be here today. You know, yesterday we had a big panel here on the stage with me and Chris, where we talked a lot about what is Overwatch and got, you know, heavily into the gameplay, talked a lot about what the world was. But what we thought would be really cool for day 2 is to bring these guys up and talk more about the inspiration behind Overwatch and the why of Overwatch. So I want to introduce you guys to the panel here. I feel very honored to be sitting amongst these guys. So to my direct left here is Jeff Chamberlain. Jeff is the guy who directed the Overwatch announced trailer that you guys saw yesterday. So thought it was amazing.
And for purposes of continuity, you guys remember Jeff's work. He directed the Wrath of the Lich King trailer. My son, you know. Jeff's old school Blizzard.
Yeah.
Thanks, thank you.
Burning Crusade, Heart of the Swarm, that was all Jeff. So then we have, as you guys may or may not know, Mr. Chris Metzen, the creative director of Overwatch. And pretty much everything else at Blizzard, so you guys know about Chris. Really excited about the next guy over there. That is Mr. Bill Petrus. Bill is the art director of Overwatch. Bill was also the original art director on World of Warcraft.
If you guys ever enjoyed the original World of Warcraft, you were pretty much moving through Bill's paintings. So.
And last but definitely not least is the lead concept artist from Overwatch, Mr. Arnold Sang. He's the guy who drew the amazing characters that you see in Overwatch. So give it up for Arnold.
Hey guys.
All right, so I'm going to kind of ask these guys questions, and we're going to talk about, you know, the different things that's going on in Overwatch and why we came up with these ideas. We'll have time for questions at the end, so don't worry about that. I want to start with Bill and Chris. So, you know, in a lot of ways, when we flash back to the year 2002, we're all working on World of Warcraft, and when it came to that vision of Azeroth, I really feel like it was a Chris and Bill world. It was like Lennon and McCartney. And we've reunited you guys to build a new world. So why don't you talk about what it was like back then and what it's like now being reunited, working on a new Blizzard universe?
Well, you could probably guess working with Chris is a lot of fun. One thing, working with Chris especially really brings a lot of the inspiration out of the art team. Chris has a real passion for art and creativity, and he really seems to drive the artists to do better and better, and a real inspiration for the team. So even back on early vanilla WoW, it was the same. On Overwatch, it's the same thing again. I think for my personal favorite part of working with Chris is when Chris gets really excited by the art team, when the artists and developers turn around and excite Chris, and then Chris runs around the hallway excited, and it's really funny. That's my favorite part, is watching Chris get really excited through the office and just give us the high fives during the day. That's my favorite part.
It was really awkward.
Thank you. Thank you. You're welcome.
You are not awkward. It makes me feel
Thank you.
awkward. Welcome to the Chris Metzen panel. It's funny, Bill and I go back a long way with Jeff Kaplan. You know, we spent a lot of time building the original World of Warcraft, and it was wild coming back together for this thing. What's it been? You know, 13 years, and we just kind of fell back into our rhythm, and it was just super fun. And the process of seeing a lot of these maps and these world locations come together, and the particular way Bill leads the team, like in the color values and the way the lighting kind of builds volume into any given scene. I'm like, holy cow, we're right back in the mix. It's a Bill Petrus world. Which was super fun, just to get back into rhythm. And honestly, you know, Bill and I both are really, we say, standing on the shoulders of a genius. We're kind of hanging around the neck of a genius. Arnold saying. You guys have seen like the art at the beginning of the trailer. That's kind of Arn's house style. So we've just been trying to keep pace with Arn, and we've really been enjoying this new art style, this fresh new take. I mean, many of you saw that trailer yesterday. How many of you guys have played the game so far this weekend? Awesome. Awesome, but it's pretty fresh, right? Like it's Blizzard-y, but it's this new thing, you know, and really between, you know, Arn on the character side, just kind of providing that vision, and Bill on the world side, and really everything else. It's this new thing has happened that we're really, really enjoying, let alone the way that translates into, you know, the 3D cinematic space. We're on this new visual adventure. You guys want to weigh in on
Yeah, totally.
your experiences so
Sure,
far?
I could add to that. I mean, when we started out the cinematic process, you know, usually you look at the art in the game and the art in the cinematic, and there's a little bit of a difference there. And I think that just goes back to many years ago when game graphics weren't really that great at all, just because of the technology. And so we wanted to do something way higher end. When we got to this, obviously it's a reset for us, and we can do something new. So we were very enthusiastic to and inspired by Bill and Arn's artwork, and we just wanted to, replicate what they did, not necessarily make it in a different world, but replicate that same look, but have it, have that fine-tuned cinematic quality to it. So yeah, it's really inspiring. It's awesome to work with that.
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges we had on developing the Overwatch art style was just trying to stay within Blizzard's visual legacy while pushing this game and its visuals to a new generation. How do we make something that still feels Blizzard but is something fresh? I think Blizzard's exaggerated proportions, dynamic, epic heroes, all that stuff. Those are some of the biggest things for us, and it was really exciting working with these guys.
Awesome. You guys are mentioning the cinematic, and I heard Chris, talking a lot about we're kind of blazing into new territory. Obviously, that cinematic that we debuted yesterday in the opening was a real reach for Blizzard, a real sort of statement of something different. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Jeff, of kind of what got us to that place, and I'll put you on the spot in front of everybody right here.
Yeah, no problem. So when we first started talking to the game team about what they wanted to do, like I said, we knew that it was a blank slate for us, and it was pretty exciting. As a studio, we're always trying to push as much story as we can, and we really thought this might be a great opportunity for that. Funny thing is, we get into the kickoff meeting, I guess you'd call it, and Kaplan, Jeff here, tells us everything about the world, and we start formulating these ideas that are kind of within our normal wheelhouse, which is this needs to be mighty and epic and, just heavy, right, and kick-ass, right? And then Arn comes in and he goes, hey, I think we should center it around some kids. And of course, my first reaction was, it was a great idea, but my first reaction was that's just not the way I think, or the way I've, thought for many years at Blizzard. And someone, I can't remember who, someone says, well, do you like the Goonies? And I was like, oh yeah, I love the Goonies, that's a great movie. Well, do you like Stand By Me or E.T.? And yeah, it's yeah, I love those movies. Okay, so then I was on board. The funny thing is, so then we started talking about all these different ideas, and we got to this idea of these kids being in this museum and so on and so forth. So I took those ideas back to the game team, and we started developing the storyboards that you see behind us. And same thing happened, I was like, okay, we're gonna do some kids in a museum. And everyone's like, kids, and so I was like, well, do you guys like Goonies? And they're like, yeah, we love Goonies. Do you guys like OT? And like, yeah, we love that. And so it's just that was kind of the thing that got everybody out of their normal thought process and really made it exciting for us to work on something that is a little bit different than what we normally do. And I really feel like everybody eventually got on board with the idea, and I think it really shows in the final product. So if you guys don't mind just giving a hand to the Cinemax team that's out in the crowd, I'm sure they're out there. So.
Woo! Yeah, it was pretty amazing, and I think a lot of us found it very emotional and inspiring in a way that we really hadn't felt before. For me, one thing that was really cool is that character arc. That watching the older brother, actually changing his world outlook, I thought was really cool. And then, of course, I feel like there's that moment where Tracer is speaking to all of us, the viewers. She's not just talking to the kids at the end. So some really powerful moments.
Yeah, it's funny actually. That moment at the end when Tracer was talking to Kid was supposed to be like the moment, and then the moment that was really heavy at the end, and then turns out the relationship between the two kids ended up overpowering that, I thought. And so, I think for me the moment is when the two brothers become brothers again. It's really cool at the end there. So.
Awesome. So earlier, Chris was touching on this a little bit, and I think Arnold mentioned it as well. We're constantly talking about trying to break new ground and move on. We love and revere the Blizzard franchises, Warcraft, Diablo, StarCraft. They're so important to us. So it's a little nerve-wracking, coming out and saying, well, we're going to put a game that we hope someday earns its spot on the convention center hall out front at future BlizzCons, next to those mega ones. And I talked about it a little bit in panel 1 yesterday about, what we're going to do with the gameplay to make this a very Blizzard type of game. But I'd love to hear from you guys about, the universe. How are we going to make it a Blizzard universe, and talk about the Blizzard art style and what's important about that.
Go for it. All right, I guess I'll take this one. So on the art side, as Arn mentioned earlier, too, for us when we're developing this look, there's such a heritage to the Blizzard art style, the exaggerated silhouettes and the color and the vibrant world, the approachability. So for Overwatch, we took all those things into mind. But even above all that, the basis of the art direction is really readability. And how it enhances the gameplay and the experience of the players. So the art in Overwatch, we really want to have it vibrant and strong silhouettes. We still want to be edgy as well, with textures and little cracks in the rocks and everything. But the handcrafted feeling, exactly, we talk a lot about. But readability is the key, and you'll notice a lot in the artwork. It isn't overdone. It doesn't have a lot of detail. It's readability. Can you tell where a character should go? When Arn draws a character, it's really clear where the character is aiming. So readability is really the cornerstone of the style. And Chris just mentioned it too, about really that handcrafted feeling in the Blizzard work, where the textures, you can see the brush strokes, on the metals and things like that. So that, on the art direction side, those are the really big points that we really, sort of the pillars of the art.
Yeah, I think one of the moments where the art style really came together was when the character team, Renaud Galland, the first character we modeled was Torbjorn.
Torbjorn.
And just figuring out how do we infuse, the handcrafted feel with this. We have this new engine, this new technology. The materials, we have the ability to make it very realistic. And there's a lot of games out there these days that go that route. But I think, like you guys said, Blizzard style, it's lived in, it's handcrafted. So I think the team did a really great job pulling it off. You can see some of the process here, how we got from concept to, we painted over, we kind of went back and forth. And I'm super proud of the team and how Torbjorn looks and all the rest of the characters.
Could we get a big shout out to the talented art staff of Overwatch and engineers in the development team?
Another really significant part of having developed Overwatch, I think we talked about it a little bit yesterday, I think Jeff might have brought it up, is over the years, our cinematics department, we've worked with pretty tightly. You guys, if you've played, StarCraft 2, or really all of our games from the beginning, our cinematics department has done some of the greatest cinematics for video games consistently over the years, and that partnership has always been very strong. But uniquely on Overwatch, what was super fun and super good for our shop is that partnership started day one. As we were kind of getting the art style together, as we were defining the game at a more kind of distilled level, we started working on these universe ideas and this intro cinematic really, really early, like way earlier than normally we would engage on a project like that. at that point in development. And Jeff and his team were instrumental in kind of helping us find this style that translates between the reality of the game world and the reality of the cinematic expression. We've never had this level of cohesion before. And it's just another cool story behind the scenes of Overwatch, that even kind of Blizzard's changing and pulling together in totally different ways to make this a reality. So that's just been it's one of my favorite things about this game so far, is how it's just drawing parts of the company even closer together than we even had been before. It's just, this game's kind of good for us in a lot of ways.
So I've been walking around a lot at the show floor and hanging out at the demo area, and it's been so much fun talking to people as they finish up playing the game. And one of the things that people keep asking me is, how do you guys come up with these ideas for these heroes? So I think it'd be really fun to talk about some of the heroes and how we came up with the ideas and how they came to be. So maybe Arn, you can riff on it a little bit, and Chris, jump in there too.
Sure. We have a super talented team, and with a game like this, with all these different heroes, ideas come from everywhere. We have some heroes that are from team submitted ideas. Some ideas come from design has a really cool concept for a hero, or an artist has a really cool visual hook, and then that's where we'll start. For Pharah, I think we really started with Jeff Goodman's original design of, how about a hero with a jetpack and a rocket launcher? And that was it. The gameplay was solid, but we didn't really have a good visual. It sounded like a very simple concept, but it actually took us a lot of iteration to get to where Pharah is today.
Do you remember his original nickname?
Rocket Dude.
Rocket Dude.
Yeah, it used to be a dude. Well, it kind of went, we went back and forth. One of the first original concepts by Justin Tavarat, it was a super high concept. I love the shapes and the silhouettes. But then we looked at it, we were like, oh, it's a little too high concept. We wanted to ground it a little. So then you see the next one, oh yeah, it's a dude in a jump pack with a rocket launcher. But then suddenly we almost stripped out everything interesting about the hero. And then we went through several other iterations, you can see. But retaining some of that original spirit of Justin's original sketch and pulling some ideas from all these different artists, we're able to come up with the final design, which I'm super proud of and excited to share with you guys.
It's been super fun because the heroes obviously are the sole equity of the game, right? And our ability to have a lot of different ideas. So as Arn's saying, we kind of latched onto this kind of ratatouille thing, right? Like anyone can cook, which means good ideas are going to hook out of anywhere. And so the fun part is, no matter where the idea comes from, it's just us huddling together and figuring out just how to hammer it into shape and how to find almost this two-layer process of the fantasy of gameplay. From a pure design standpoint, what do you want it to feel like? How do you want to feel as you're moving through the space, as you're using your abilities, from locomotion to the specificity of your weapons? That's a very specific fantasy with very specific, ways that takes shape. And then on the other side, the fantasy of just the characterization. Who do you feel like? How does it feel like to be you? There could be many types of rocket dude, right? But what's the fantasy? And that's how we came to the more distilled version of Pharah specifically. And she's very altruistic, and we kind of joke that she's got like kind of a little bit of this Captain America kind of vibe. Like she's all about justice and order and trying to make the world a better place and just kind of bring order to the chaos. And so suddenly her personality started to distill. And then we get into the process of, we spent a couple weeks in Los Angeles in recording studios and just kind of dialing in finding the right actor with that right, kind of accent inflection, and just kind of riffing on lines in the studio and like, yeah, that's her. Oh, no, she'd never say that. And we just kind of found it as we went, and it was a very team-based process, which made it really, really fun. And everyone effectively on the team, when we started dropping the voice into the game, you're like, yeah, This is feeling, you know, that's exactly it, right? Everyone was kind of just really feeling it. So it's an interesting process where we all kind of come together and kind of find the shape of it. It's a little different for us, but it really works. We have great certainty when we can all look at each other and go like, I think we've nailed it, you know?
I remember other moments where other heroes came to be. Reaper is a good example where Reaper, we had no idea what the... by the way, we look like an advertisement for the Blizzard store.
We're like a geek boy band.
Somebody from licensing better have donuts at the Overwatch team like Monday morning for this, but yeah, it's kind of embarrassing.
Yeah.
But anyway, Reaper was particularly cool because that was a hero that was entirely inspired by the art. You know, we just saw that character and we're like, oh man, that's cool. Like, he has to be in the game. And that's one where you just see the art and go, okay, we're gonna need to sit down and figure out what this guy does. Winston was the same way. I don't know where the idea for Winston came from, Arnold, but we were blown away with that, and we just had the picture, and then, you know, we ran with it. So where did Winston come from?
He comes from the moon.
Of course he does.
I think Winston's a really interesting case because with this new world, this new universe, we really wanted to define the boundaries of how far could we how far in the fantastical realm could we go and still stay relatable and within Earth. And there's something about Winston that, even though as kooky as apes on the moon sounds, there's something familiar about it, and I think he really represents, you know, Overwatch and everything we're trying to do of pushing this new world and, you know, new, like, boundless imagination. You know, he's all about, what's the line, Chris? Yeah,
Imagination is the essence of discovery.
Yes. Winston's a big science nerd. So yeah, totally. And it just distills right down the middle with like, I get him, right? He's very, as exotic as his kit is, he's a very relatable person, you know? One of the things I always trip on when I think about Overwatch is I go back to World of Warcraft. If you really think about WoW, good God, 20 years ago, it started super simple. Can you imagine, how many of you guys played Warcraft 1? It's pretty good. Can you imagine Warcraft 1? Picture that, right? Orcs and humans, like only orcs and humans. Imagine Warcraft 1 with a Draenei running by. Imagine Warcraft 1 with, you know, Ragnaros stomping through a mission. I go back to this idea that sometimes really good ideas start simple. With Warcraft over, good God, 20 years, it's gonna take a while to process. You had X number of games to build upon a pretty solid and very simple base. And game by game, expansion by expansion, we were able to kind of weave in new mythology, new art, new characters, new ideas, and it just kind of shaped itself over time. And if you look at WoW now, I always wonder, if you're just a person on the street and you look at World of Warcraft now, we just airdrop you into, you know, Shadow Moon Valley. We airdrop you into, you know, Valley of the Four Winds. You're going, wow, this is nuts. The pandas running by, like what? It's like 1,000 flavors, right? The weirdest layerings. It's like this tectonic, you know, striation of zany. But you can get there over time. So as I look at Overwatch, we're kind of finding what is the base, what is the solid base. Is Winston as exotic as it gets? Is that pushing too far? Is Zenyatta, you know, this robot monk, is that too weird? Where's the boundary? And what's kind of fun about Overwatch is we don't exactly know. And that's so liberating. It's a kind of a weird thing to say, right? But it's kind of like WoW. Let me rephrase. WoW was kind of built to be, over time, this big sandbox. And if the quest designers or the artists on the World of Warcraft team go, you know what, I have this hook, it's goblins with a rocket ship. Or it's intelligent, you know, dimensional shades of blue from, you know, the Phantom Zone. And, you know, whatever the kooky idea is, as long as you can rationalize it and make it fit within the context of the game, it could take almost any shape. You know, like think of all the kooky ideas you've seen in WoW. And as I relate that to Overwatch, we have this kind of infinite horizon ahead of us in terms of the characters we choose, where we go in terms of story and things like that. It's like being at the start of this kind of awesome new vector, and it's very liberating conceptually.
One of the things that was interesting early on is we kind of treated Tracer as this Rosetta Stone character in the universe, and we all instantly fell in love with her and wanted her to sort of be like that centerpiece hero that we had. But what was fascinating was that Cinematics was tackling the problem at the exact same time as the game team. So I'd love to hear Jeff and Bill talk a little bit about, how was it collaborating on bringing Tracer to light? And what were some of the things that Cinematics uniquely brought to Tracer versus what were some of the things that the Overwatch art team uniquely brought to Tracer?
That's great. That actually developing Tracer on the game side, Arn's concept with the art team, and then Jeff's group was also modeling Tracer. We quickly found out that the cinematic group very closely followed the concepts very closely. And on the game side, we would iterate a little bit more in game. So right off the bat, we were like, Jeff would come over, he's like, Billy, okay, Tracer's legs are a little longer. What are you guys doing? And I'm like, Jeff, in the game it looks better. So we pretty much, there is slight differences in there, but it was largely the cinematic group also taught us really pay attention to the proportions, the blockouts of the character. We'll do a simplified version of Tracer and put her in the game. We just call it like a blockout. And then also just on her materials also, I think Arn, you did a concept of her material. Like we'll do a sheet and just have like different materials, like, oh, this is the purple shirt material. And Arn showed it to me, I'm like, yeah, that looks good. And then the cinematic group, and I think there was like 2 pages of additional materials
like
that we forgot, 5, okay. And so that was the big one, and maybe you could chat about this, but I also felt that you took Tracer further than we could take her. And I remember very early on you told me that usually, Jeff, you were saying that Blizzard Cinematics takes a character on a scale of 1 to 2. If a game model is a 2, I would say in the amount of finished quality, you would take it to like a higher number for your cinematics. But on this one, it was much closer together. You were saying like the steps in between are much closer together, and I always remember that.
Yeah, we were, I mean, if you look, I wish we had a little bit of a bigger picture of Tracer's jacket here, but if you were to look at like the detail on the weathering of her jacket, usually we wouldn't necessarily like try to go one-to-one with the game model, but on this we actually took the game model textures and started with that as a basis, and then just detailed a little bit more just because we have the higher resolution to work with. But the overall feeling is that it still has that, like Billy said earlier, the handcrafted look to it. And so, yeah, working with Billy and the rest of the game team on this was awesome because, we did have the luxury to go back and forth and say like, all right, is this too much detail? Yeah, let's pull it back a little bit, and maybe that's a little bit too simple. And so we were just working together to try to find that nice balance of what the cinematic version of the game model is, and it was a lot of fun.
I'm actually really curious, and this is totally out of my ballpark, but hearing from Jeff and Bill on which of these characters is the easiest to work with from your different disciplines versus which is the most difficult?
Which character is the most difficult to work with? I think for me, personally, I would look at Winston, for example. For all the folks that played him and saw the videos, there's a lot of movement he has. He goes into like a rage mode. So there's so much more demanding of that model to change into this rage sort of animation. Ryan Dennison, our lead animator, actually created it, and I think Winston was difficult just because of the expectations that we wanted out of the model, of him just morphing into this giant, sort of maddened, sort of, enraged view of him. And I still think the model, it still has more to go on it. And I think just that alone, I think, was one of the big challenges that we're looking at.
Yeah, I'd say actually similarly, Winston was the hardest for us.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Well, because he has all these like armor pieces and stuff, right?
Yeah.
in the game, it's okay if the character lifts his arm up or her arm up and the shoulder pad goes through their head a little bit or something like that. I mean, it's a little more forgiving. But in cinematics, it looks really, really wrong. And so Winston actually can't move with the armor that he has on it, realistically. And so we're always, you know, depending on which way he's facing the camera, we're always like tucking things in where it can't really tuck in and just faking it for camera. And so he was the most difficult in that way. He also has, you know, the rage mode and the hair and everything. So he's kind of like the full kit. Funny enough, Widowmaker was pretty much the opposite. You know, something was different about her, and we just like everything like hit perfectly on her for us. So we drop her in a shot, light her, and the shot would be almost done. And so she was by far the easiest.
Awesome, and he had up earlier that beautiful poster that Arnold had drawn, and this is hanging over in the art gallery. It's really fun to go over and look at the exhibit. We have a great archivist, Dana Bishop, who put together really fascinating, you know, not only of Overwatch stuff, but there's some great WoW stuff in there. I was looking, there was John LaCraft's notes, you know, Mortal Strike, overpowered, are handwritten. So I suggest you guys go over and look at the art gallery. It's a lot of fun. But this poster, man, this felt like one of those breakthrough moments for the team. I'd love to hear you guys talk about, you know, what this poster, you know, meant to you, Arnold. You're the guy who drew it, and then, you know, Chris, like you always talk about how this is kind of like a cornerstone of Overwatch. So, what are your guys' thoughts about that?
Yeah, this poster was really, I think, instrumental in bringing the whole team together, united on this vision of Overwatch, of what we were doing. I think early on, you know, we talked about doing a poster. We tried all these different layouts, but at the end, you know, the game's not about one single hero. There's no main character, so we're thinking like, you know, very, very fighting game, very comic booky about this. And if you guys know my roots, like that, I'm all about fighting games and comic books. So this was really natural for me to just like line them all up, have their unique silhouettes and color palettes just show. And I think the original sketch of the poster, it was cropped a little bit more to make it seem like, you know, it could go on. It could just go on, and you know, I hope it does. You know, I hope we just keep developing these awesome heroes.
Yeah, the image was very powerful, and there was iterations, right? There was kind of one that was like the original poster, and then it kind of dialed in over time as we knew more about the characters. But it was like this challenge. Arn just dropped this boom, was like dropping the mic. Just this image, we all went, oh my God, all right. And like Arn said, it almost had a sense that like, while there were X number of characters in the scene, it's like on either side, it could be infinite, right? And it was just this challenge of like, can you fill in the rest of the picture? Can you imagine the next 100 characters, right? As the scene got bigger and bigger, and there was just gravity to it and specificity to it. Almost like, look at all these robots and cybermonks and dwarves and cowboys. And I mean, it was just like, okay, there are no rules. Let's just go. It was like impossibly inspiring and challenging. You know, it dared you to dream more into it. You know, that's what I always loved about it.
I'm no math genius, but I know that there's 12 heroes playable here at BlizzCon. I count more than 12 heroes in that poster. Just saying. All right, next topic. So we mentioned that this poster was definitely a breakthrough moment for the team in a lot of ways. I think this was almost like that rallying banner that Arn just threw down and really inspired us all to, you know, try to make this game. Can you guys? I'd love to hear from each one.